Well, we are mere days away from the official release of Bright Lights, so let's go through and select some cards that I personally think are going to be big hitters in this upcoming meta and allow these new heroes to really establish themselves within this new space. Now, there were a lot of cards that I think we could have gone through and picked and talked about, because I do think that this set is actually really well positioned from a power level standpoint to make these heroes function at a high level and to be, very playable. But I tried to pick 10 that I think are going to be perhaps the uber nuts for their respective heroes. So let's kick things off with a couple of honorable mentions. Starting with Big Bertha, because how do you not just talk about Big Bertha? I feel like this is going to be just, first of all, the fantastic meme card of the set, but second of all, a really good sideboard card against Dromai players. Yes, it's a 3-for-6 that can boost. Yes, it can block for 3. Yes, it can pop dragons. And yes, it can give counters to hyperdrivers if you're Max or really anybody that's running hyperdrivers. So I think this card is fantastic. Heck, it could even probably make the top 10 with how good it is, but there are also some other great cards we're going to be talking about. Another honorable mention before we get to the 10 that I picked, Heavy Artillery is so good. This card is so good in Teklevasan. Like, this is just a slam dunk windmill slam card in Teklevasan, in my opinion. Especially if you're playing like a very controlling version of Teklevasan, if you're able to slowly but surely establish evos on the board while also just defending with your hand, eventually you get to the point where you pivot and you play Heavy Artillery and they just start taking essentially unblockable damage. This is better than Overpower. This is better than Dominate against most heroes. This is just 6 unpreventable damage, and that is quite good. Let's move on to number 10. These are in no particular order, but I'm going to start with Steel Street Reinforcement, because Steel Street Reinforcement feels like one of those cards that can just be so comfortable in literally any Mechanologist list that you want. It's a Majestic, it blocks 1, but it's a block card, so it can dance around Overpower. Yes, you can play it in any Mechanologist that you want, but it is going to get most value in anyone that's playing Evos. And the nice thing too is that, yes, even though Teklevasan is clearly the master of Evos, you can play Evos in just about any of these Mechanologists and feel happy about it, because there are a lot of Evos that can do some really cool things. I see this card being a shoe-in Teklevasan, and then just being possible to slot in for any other Mechanologist if you're playing Evos. Also super solid, and in fact one of the best cards in the entire freaking set, is Evo Steel Soul Memory. I put a couple of the Teklevasan cards first because I want to say I think Teklevasan is actually going to be quite good in the meta, and I think he has the capacity to be one of the, upper echelon heroes in the meta, simply because he can be more defensive and he can play this sort of like value game very easily, and he wins the value game if he can establish these evos onto the board. And one of the best ones, in fact I would say the best one, is Steel Soul Memory, because it's a temper block 3, so it can block literally for 6 if you want to give it up, but for 5 otherwise. It can pitch for blue, so you can play it to the second cycle. And after you equip this, if you're equipping it from another Evo, and Security Head is the one that you're going to be equipping from most likely, this will give you +1 intellect, which is quite good. Now, it's not always going to play out that way. Of course, a lot of these cards in this are very variable. There are highs and lows to the cards, and I think that is smart design from the LSS perspective. When you're giving your opponent the opportunity to make advantageous plays, and you the opportunity to make poor plays by playing something at the wrong time, and then vice versa, I think that's cool design. And this one does have the capability of it just not giving you anything except temper, but it's still really good if you get a block 5. So this card is one of the best, in my opinion, in the set. Along with just, I know Brian Gottlieb said this card is unnecessary in Teklevasan, like you can play Teklevasan without it, and I'm sure he's correct. But why would you want to? Why would you want to play without this amazing card? If your game plan is to play the value game, to throw some damage at your opponent, and then give yourself the space and the tempo to set up these evos over time, especially if you're playing a lot of security heads, which honestly probably could make this list as well. If you're playing a lot of security heads and then, ending it off with like your Steel Souls, transforming is just like, it's like why would you not do that? Yes, there are hate cards that just blow this up on the spot, but let's be honest, almost none of those hate cards get played, period, before this, and we're going into maybe a meta where it's sort of required by this being a card for you to try and play some of those, but you just don't play it in that matchup if you think that they have that. Otherwise, you're just super good. Resolving this and then being able to attack and take a card from your opponent guaranteed and then leak damage, particularly in the end game, is really freaking powerful. This is a very good card. And yes, I'm sure there are use cases where it's not as good, but it just feels, like what, like Blasmafet and Urser, well, more Blasmafet. It feels like what Blasmafet probably should have been. You know what I mean? It feels like that. It feels like a step up from like Blasmafet. Not the new one, but the old school Monarch one. It's like, this is the end game. You pitch it to the end game, you get it. It's like, this is what Soul Harvest should have been, right? And then we go on to some non-Evo, some non-Teklevasan. Look, I'm pretty high on Teklevasan as like a overall character to play in the upcoming competitive meta. I think he fits a nice little control niche that is sort of falling by the wayside to some degree. So I'm pretty high on that. But now we have some more sort of generic cards that can fit into really every single mechanologist in the form of Heist, a 2-for-5 boost, blocks for 3, and just gives you the capability of getting one of those items that you've accidentally or on purpose boosted away into the arena without having to pay for it. That is a huge, huge play. This is oftentimes just a value 2-for-5 to like kind of close out, or have somewhere in the middle of the chain. But if you close this out with an item sitting in your banish zone, or if you've scrapped an item into your banish zone on a previous turn that you've already played, this card is like a must block, because giving you the value of going and getting one of the best items in your deck, assuming that you're scrapping or just banishing a really good item, is very powerful. And again, variability on the use case of cards says that sometimes this is just a 2-for-5 chain ender. I'm okay with that. That is totally fine. Sometimes this is a mid-chain 2-for-5 boost. And sometimes this is a 2-for-5 that when it hits, brings you a Teklo core back, or brings you a boom grenade back, so on and so forth. So if we're looking at range analysis, which you should be doing in this set, particularly in this set, if you're looking at what the range of the outcomes of a card like this can be, so that you can then gauge the variability of if it's useful, this card has a really high ceiling, and honestly a not very far down floor. It's a pretty high floor as well. So I like this card a lot. Speaking of cards, I grouped these together because in my mind these fit the same exact niche, and it almost feels bad to take away a spot from another card by both of these cards basically being the same card. War Machine destroys the card in the arsenal, so it's Command and Conquer, and Terminator Tank is Pummel. Basically, it just, when this hits, they discard a card. But the point being that in the end game, these are huge threats. Even in the middle of the game, if you have 2 Evos established, this is still just a nice little 6-for-3. But these right here are end game threats that your opponent has to respect. They literally cannot not respect it. It is not allowed, because overpower is a thing that exists. And when you swing 3-for-9 with overpower that does something, an on hit in a deck and an archetype and a class that traditionally doesn't really have that many on hits, this is a big deal. And perhaps this is one of the biggest cards that really points me towards Teklevasan and wanting to play Teklevasan. Even though I would say that Dash.io is my favorite hero from the set because she's very combo heavy, I think Teklevasan would be the one that I would pick up and run into a tournament if I were picking up one of these 3 heroes, just because I feel like he has some really serious chops, and in part probably due to these cards. You probably didn't expect to see Backup Protocol Red on this list, but hear me out, okay? Look, hear me out. Backup Protocol Red is whatever attack you want it to be in the mid game. This is a 2 for get whatever attack you want and then play it. So this is such a me pick. I don't know. It's so stupid. Like, people are going to be like, this is the dumbest list ever, but Backup Protocol Red is legit good. And why is it legit good? Well, because you can play a line where you go 0 cost boost, 0 cost boost, 0 cost boost, and then come in for 2 with max velocity, close the chain, break the boots, Instant Speed Backup Protocol, paying 2 more, so that's for 4 resources. Break the Boost Instant Speed Backup Protocol, back the max velocity, and play the max velocity. It's so stupid. It's just dumb. But yeah, it was a Teklo core plus your Tunic resource plus a blue in hand. And then you need the max velocity or one of the boost cards in Arsenal, and then you have your 5-card hand, and it totally functions. But even if you're not doing that, this is literally just a value item. And the best part is you can prime this by blocking with good red attacks, and then just find a turn where you want to get extra value off of it if you have extra resources floating. Let's say you pitched a blue, but you only have like no point in playing out these other things. You just pay 2 of the blue and then pay 1 for a 1-cost boost. Like, this is a really solid card. I really like this card, and when I first saw it, I thought this was the dumbest card in the world, and then playing with it, it's like way better than I thought. So Backup Protocol Red, don't sleep on it, man. Don't sleep on it. Also, don't sleep on Boom Grenade. And it's funny, I'm way higher on this card than I was. I'm a good bit lower on Boom Grenade than I was before, but the numbers don't lie. The stats don't lie. This is still a 0 for 4 if your opponent doesn't respect your damage. And if you're pushing boost attacks with like breakpoints, so 1 for 4s, 0 for 4s, 1 for 5s, that sort of thing. If you're boosting like 3 times a turn and you started with this, or if you're playing Dash.io and, put this from the top of your deck paying 1, this is just a free 4 damage. It's a 0 to 60. If you look at this card, I mean, it speaks for itself as Dash.io. And then you look at like an aggressive Teklevasen, you could still consider running this. I mean, you put it out there, you crank it, and then you continue with like a 3 for 7. And then if this doesn't hit, if your opponent like value blocks it with like 2 cards and like a piece of equipment, this goes to your graveyard and you scrap it. And then you can give yourself another 3 for 7 off of like the dog card, whatever that one's called. Junkyard Dog, which is a really good card actually. So I don't know, it feels great. And of course it feels great in Max too, because Max just wants to push a lot of damage, and this is just a 0 for 4. I mean, it's really, really good. The yellow 0 for 3 probably still could get played in combo decks and just general aggro decks. The blue, maybe it falls off. I did play it for a good bit, last week, but I think this card just mathematically, even though I'm a little down on it right now, mathematically just makes so much sense for it to be just very defining. We have a couple cards left, and Overload Script is the one that I included. I know some people are going to say that I should have included Penetration Script, the yellow that gives +1 to everything. I don't like that card. I'm not going to lie to you. Tell me in a comment below why you think that card is good, and I will gladly listen to you and have a conversation with you. But Overload Script, to me, is where it's at. Yes, someone can react. They can react with defense reactions. Shocking. They could also have done this exact same thing with the +1 and it would still get covered up. Oftentimes, +1ing your attacks that are already at breakpoints, to me, feels irrelevant. What feels very relevant is having things at breakpoints and then making them use equipment or take damage and then trigger your boom grenades and things like that with Overload Script. And to me, this one feels really good in Dash.io. It feels like you could easily play this in Max, because it's a 0 cost. You can crank it out. You don't have to pay any resources for it. This card, I am very high on. I was high on when I saw it, and I am still way up on it. To me, it just really fits nicely. Off the top of the deck as Dash, even just playing it from hand and cranking it, it feels really, really good. And second to last card, Twin Drive is an MVP. This card absolutely enables maximum velocity. Now, I did not include any of the reprinted cards, so there's not going to be Tunic here in the last spot after I talk about this. I'm not including max velocity. This card, worthy of the spot. Double boost seems crazy, but it enables so much. It enables like Pulse Wave Harpoon as well. Like you play this, double boost, Pulse Wave Harpoon, and boost Pulse Wave Harpoon, you're pulling a 3 block onto the combat chain to block out of somebody's hand, and that is quite good. This card really enables a lot of things. You don't have to boost twice. You can just choose to boost once or not at all, and that variability is huge. This card is going to be one of the best from the set by far, but it's not the best, because the best card in this all mechanologist set, and it's perhaps not even particularly close, is Tome of the Imperial Flame. Tome of Imperial Flame is the best card. This is like Codex of Frailty levels good. This is Codex of Frailty right here. This card is so good. Tome of Imperial Flame it forces you to, the worst part about this card, literally the worst part about this card, not even the no block value. The worst part about this card is that it makes you lose the Crown of Providence in favor of my favorite crown and Crown of Dominion. And that's not even that bad, because then it means you can do some other stuff with like the gold token and stuff. But that's the worst thing about this card, because everything else about it is so good, and it allows some of the like the shakiness that Dromai players can sometimes feel. It like smooths a lot of that out. This card's nuts. Drawing 2 cards, pitching 2 cards. Yes, there are some use cases. I'm not going to sit here and give you all the use cases of when that could be a problem, but pitching 2 red cards, and in doing so, floating 2 resources right after you resolve this and get your 2 resources, paying one of those resources to Flamescale Furnace to get 3 resources. This generates 3 resources from playing it. It's a blue in a red deck. It draws you 2 cards in an aggro deck, most likely. And it allows you to play 3 cross dragons that can be aggressive or can be value-based. This card's nuts. I think this is the best card in the set, if we're not talking about like Fiendal Spring Tunic. This card's insane. So those are my top 10 meta-defining cards going forward. Do you agree with this being the #1 card? Let me know in a comment below if I'm correct about that, because I feel very strongly that this is probably the best card in the set, and I am very much looking forward to opening some of this product and putting together my collection, because I want to play Dash IO, even though she's probably not the best. I still want to play her because I want to hit that like Windmill Slam 2 just big, just giant max velocities on the same turn. I think it would be hilarious. So if you enjoy this type of video, if you want to see more of this content, make this number go slightly higher. When we hit 17,000, I don't know, something fun will happen. Find out for yourself by hitting the button. As always, thanks for watching.